In today's episode, I will discuss my wealth building algorithm, to which I attribute my entire success. Consider this my North Star. And when I devised and used this algorithm personally, I was able to operate with a completely different mindset. It is absolutely liberating moving from a fear of failure mindset, eliminating deeply conservative thinking and short and medium term noise and news cycles. It's a fundamental requirement. You remove this anxiety if you want to grow meaningful wealth and income through investing using real estate. This episode is a must listen. If you are struggling with today's news, doom and gloom, and higher interest rates, this algorithm will hopefully rock you to your core and leave you with a deep sense of urgency to get started. Because remember, the sooner you implement a strategy and stay the course, the sooner you see the results, the sooner you achieve financial freedom.
Welcome to Burn Your Boats podcast. Burn the boats is an often used metaphor for a positive change in direction and moving forward in the face of adversity. To burn your boats is to build a new reality, not using the tools, people, or existing behaviors holding you back from your life's real dreams and ambitions. As real estate investors, having interviewed thousands of successful professionals from all walks of life, Clark and David have identified freedom from financial anxiety as a top priority for many. There is a path to crafting this new life you seek. It starts with thinking differently, learning new skills, and how to say no. Let's elevate your vision of a wealthy financial future where you live life in control of your time and energy. Achieving financial freedom is often a choice, and for most, we must exit our comfort zone and burn our boats to achieve it. This podcast strives to identify pivotal moments and milestones in life that will help set you in a new direction, where future you will look back and recognize the moment everything changed.
All right, guys, welcome to Burn Your Boats, episode number 3. How are you feeling today, David?
I'm feeling good, Clark. We've got a great topic today.
We do. It's very important.
It's the thing, that I, in the years that I have spent talking with investors, it is the single biggest differential between success and failure.
Yeah.
And what that differential is confidence. What prevents people from taking action? Why do they think everything is going to go
Bad.
Yeah. Because the people who we see make it to what we were talking about in the last episode, Wealth Island, none of them started off day one and went, yeah, I'm going to be super successful.
Right.
And that's just the end of it. No, they all had to carve it out, but they had to grow and they had to build confidence.
Yeah. So, David, let's talk a little bit about the difference between why someone may be confident, right, in terms of their financial journey, their personal journey, their fitness journey, whatever that looks like. Why would someone be confident? And then the people that aren't confident, why do you think that they're big challenges and obstacles as to why they're not confident? And ultimately, what are the stepping stones that they can put in place to be able to get to that point?
Generally, my experience has been that it's been thousands and thousands of incremental little changes in their lives, in their mindset. And if we're going to kind of dig into this in the right way today, it's just all about a growth mindset. We need to dig into a growth mindset. The people who have come to me and have already educated themselves and they have decided that they want to grow, it's amazing the difference in confidence to do that first deal if they're prepared for it.
Right.
Let's discuss, that journey from youthful, almost cocky, confidence to what gives you financial confidence. And for me, it really boils down to this. You have to understand how the world works and how time works in order to get to what I consider to be, financial confidence. So there's confidence in sports, there's confidence in sales, there's
Right.
confidence in this, that, and the other. But having financial confidence, it's a result of knowing and trying, and every single day having the ambition to have financial confidence. And for me, Clark, it's understanding that you know nothing about the future.
That is true. I'll second that for sure.
You know nothing.
I know nothing.
You know, does Jerome Powell know what's going to happen in interest rates next year?
He doesn't.
Right? Does anybody know with confidence what's going to happen in the future, financially or otherwise?
Right.
Can anybody say for sure there won't be a black swan event next year?
Yeah.
And what would happen to our lives if a black swan event did happen?
We can't control it.
You cannot control it. So how can you have confidence then about the future?
These are all great points, and I think that the black swan event, right? Who's going to be the next president? Is there going to be another COVID? Is it Can I control any of these things? I can't. David, you might be able to. I can't.
Well, I've had hundreds of conversations with people who are telling me, well, I'm not going to invest, or I'm not going to do this, or I'm not going to do that,
Right.
or I'm holding off for this, that, or the other. I've had hundreds and hundreds of conversations about people telling me, that because interest rates are high, such and such is going to happen for sure. I'm like, well, do you know how China is going to react to that, or how
Right.
the Chinese policymakers, what they're going to do? Are they going to buy more treasuries? Are they not? Do you know how the global financial market's going to respond to this event or that event? Do you know how the government's going to respond? Do you know how the Fed is going to respond? Do you know how the man on the street's going to respond? And so people make, and I'm the most guilty of this. I consider myself a reasonably well read. I keep myself fairly informed on economic matters, and so I've spent my whole life predicting what I think and acting on what I think is going to happen in the future. And it's only my confidence, my financial confidence, only increased when I yielded to the fact that I don't know anything about the future.
Right.
But there are two things that we do know.
What are those?
We know that inflation is generally part of the Fed's mandate to have a 2% inflation rate.
Right.
The Fed generally gets within reason what it wants. And so if you look back in the last 1,000 years, inflation is a fact. It is a light breeze. It's on your back. You know it's there, and you can work with it or you work without it. So let me give you just a quick physical example of what inflation is. When I was younger, my sister lived in Amsterdam, and she went out to work one day, and I grabbed her bike. And they have little towns there, and just outside of town is fields. It's all flat fields. So I hop on the bike, and there's a town like 20 miles over. Jump on the bike. I'm flying along. I have a great day, beautiful, watching all the daffodils, And I get there and I have a cup of coffee and I go to turn around and come back, and I realize there's a light breeze. And so my way over there, I got over there like in an hour or so. On the way back, it took me 5 hours
Yeah.
because now I'm fighting a
Right.
light breeze that I
Yeah.
didn't pick up on the way there.
Yeah.
That's inflation.
Yeah.
And it's real. And so you can harness inflation in your life, and you can essentially put out wings and take that breeze and let it take you all the way to what we described in our last episode
Right.
as
To
Wealth
Wealth
Island. So you do know that inflation is real, and you can fight it if you want by not investing. But it will always erode your savings. Yeah. It will always erode your buying power. You won't win. You've got to. I tried to flip more houses and earn more money.
Right.
And at the end of the day, I was like, okay, if I get to $1 million, or if you get to $2 million, whatever your number might be, then I'll be fine. And then you realize, hold on, the bar has risen in tandem. And so, I thought that I could retire if I had $1 million or $2 million. No, you can't, because inflation has now made everything 20 or 30 or 40% more expensive since you started saving.
Right.
So it's very, very, very difficult to save your way to wealth.
Right.
You have to invest your way there. And that's an eye-opener. The other thing that for sure is if you buy assets. So inflation is just going to drive the value of your assets higher with the extra cost of living.
Right.
It's a really powerful thing. Don't underestimate it. If you're older, you're smiling right now. You're listening to this because you cannot buy a can of Coke for what you used to buy a can of Coke
Right.
for. Somebody leaned into me recently at a football match. They said $1 million isn't what it used to be. It's like $1 million isn't what it used to be. And you know what? He's right.
Yeah.
The other thing we know for a fact is we're real estate guys, so I always remind people of that, is that if you take out a loan on a house, that if that house is rented, that loan will get paid off. And over time, the mortgage that you have will disappear. And so we know amortization is real. And we know within reason that the tax code in real estate is going to be fairly conducive and friendly to us. So my confidence, my financial confidence, my old man confidence comes from the fact that I know those two things. And they're the only things I know.
Yeah.
So I don't buy or not buy. I decide to, take action or not take action based on what I think is going to happen next week
Right.
or next month.
Timing the market, right?
I just don't do it.
Yeah, yeah. Because you're never going to be able to time it perfectly.
Everybody tries.
Yeah,
Yeah, when they're young.
right.
Everybody tries. And, if you can learn that one thing right away from the top of this podcast is use inflation and use the fact that renters, if somebody's in your home is presented right and it is priced right, it will always rent.
Yeah.
Always.
Agreed.
In any economic cycle,
Yeah.
there's always somebody needs shelter.
Yeah.
It's just a fact. It will rent. And if it's rented, it will pay off the mortgage. And over time, that mortgage will get eroded away and dissipate. And so if you take a 15-year approach or a 20-year approach to, let's say, real estate, and you compound inflation on the rent, you compound inflation on the value of the asset, and then you obviously compound the impact of amortization payments, your tenant paying off your loan. It is just it's a simple formula.
Yeah.
And you can decide when you're 20 how wealthy you want to be when you're 40. We'll talk about that a little bit later on the podcast.
So let's take that and let's look at it from a standpoint that you mentioned that why have anxiety about things I can't control? Like why? Like why even? I mean, why have all this pressure on things that you can't control? Why don't we just focus on the things that we can control? And to your point, we know that inflation is a thing and it's going to continue, right, forever. And we also know that if you get a mortgage, every month when that payment gets made, you owe a little bit less, right? It's not rocket science, right? So you can control a mortgage being paid, right? And you know that inflation is that breeze in your back.
Yeah.
So let's think about this from a standpoint of you're listening to this and you say, okay, so how can I get a mortgage that is going to be working to my favor with a tenant paying it down every month? And how do I work with inflation? Well, I know how you cannot work with inflation, and that's not owning hard assets, right?
That's right.
Now, you can be earning a salary, okay? And that salary keeping up with the cost of eggs, with the cost of
Now, if your
rent?
boss has anything to do with it,
Exactly.
Your boss does not want to keep you up with inflation.
So how do we do that? Is that we need to get on the right side of things where inflation is pushing against it instead of fighting inflation, which is your incomes, right? So what's the first thing in my mind that a listener can do right now to start to put those stepping stones in place? And it's very simple, is that you can do all the research you want. You can watch all the YouTube videos you want. You can listen to all of the podcasts all these great episodes we're going to put out there for you guys. However, if you don't translate that to some form of action, I don't care how smart you are. I don't care how much you know about real estate or crypto or this or that. If it's not translating into an actionable event, right? It's all for naught. And one of my favorite lines is, you cannot hit a home run from the dugout. It's impossible. You can't do it. You have to step up to the plate to swing the bat, right? Yeah. Now, are you going to miss? Are you going to trip and fall on your knee? Is the ball going to come and almost embrace you or hit you?
Yeah.
Hell yeah, it is, right? That's just what happens when you potentially take a quote unquote risk. So kind of the first step that if you're listening right now is listen, research, but don't have analysis paralysis. We have so many things out there right now that they steal your time. There's almost too much information, right? And it's actually much simpler than everyone thinks in terms of like if you're going to use real estate as a vehicle, which I think is a low hanging fruit. I think the reason I got my degree in broadcasting, I'm not a engineer. I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed. I just know that over time real estate will go up, and I don't have to really worry about it too much, right? That's it. That's kind of all you have to know. And guess what's also going to go up over time? Rents. Guess what's not going to keep up with that? Your fixed mortgage payment that you have, right? So at the end of the day, I hear all the time, and we were just talking about this earlier, is that in this climate right now, there's so many reasons not to buy any real estate in society. There's fear in the news. Okay, the interest rates are high. It's competitive. Sellers don't have their expectations are like it's still 2020 and COVID hit. There are opportunities out there to be able to take action, right, and actually make that first step. Because if you don't make that first step, all those other steps that come after it are all irrelevant. because none of them exist, right? You don't get to participate with inflation. You just get to fight inflation every day, and you're bitching and moaning about how much eggs are, right?
Yeah.
When the first of the month comes, every month, right? Everyone's complaining about it. I'm like, I'm excited because guess what? I get to make that mortgage payment every month to my bank, and I get to go $300 less that I organically owe. And then guess what? Guess what follows behind me making that mortgage payment? The tenant making their payment. And guess what's happening to rents? Inflation raises the rents up, and now my spread every year gets a little bigger and a little bigger between what my mortgage is and what my rent is that I actually get into my bank account. So the first step is taking action, and it's easier said than done, right? But at the end of the day, we're talking about confidence, right? How do we get to confidence? How do you get to become confident to where it's easier to buy that next place? It's easier to go to the gym on a Tuesday and then come back on a Wednesday, right? It's easier to make these actionable steps. So tell me a little bit, David, about what are the fears that people have as to taking that first, which I would argue is the most important step, is just the action step. Did I say what type of action? I didn't even say what, I'm just saying take an action and start moving in the right direction, because you're going to make mistakes. That's because guess what happens when you make a mistake? You learn from it, right? You learn from it and you're like, maybe I shouldn't do that mistake again. Let me do something different, right? So talk to me a little bit about what you see the biggest challenges of people taking that first step to action.
I think it's mindset. That's, by the way, that's gold. By the way, as you're talking there, I wanted to jump in on about 15 of those different points, right? But it's mindset, and it's understanding. Again, really, it's understanding the simplicity of it. I think a huge amount of people are out there looking for the complexity where it doesn't exist. Oh. And so let me give you a little story. Shortly after COVID hit, we were all still very, very unclear about what way the world was going and what was going to unfold. And I met a friend of mine for a couple of beers down my local park, some deck chairs, I was like, hey, listen, we'll sit outside, you sit 8 feet away from me and we'll shoot the breeze, right? And we got to talk about stuff that, like just nice, wholesome, what do you do? What does your job look like? What does your wife do? What is, what's your life plan? Because we were all being pretty reflective at the start of COVID, right? And so corporate guy works a corporate job. His wife was a corporate girl, and they were delighted. They were, probably in their late 30s, and they were, really, really excited that their college debt was shortly to be, they were finally, 2 or 3 years away from paying off their college debt, And then I leaned into, he asked me, he's like, what do you do? It's like, well, I buy and I renovate homes, and I lend to real estate flippers and professionals, and I own a portfolio of real estate. And it's like, oh, that's very interesting. How does it look? And through the heel and the hunt, he turned around to me at the end of the conversation, and he said, "Wow, David, that just seems so risky. Yeah. What you do." And I had just an epiphany, because I looked at him. I was like, the irony is that I look at you, and I see what you're doing. No investments. Maybe a small 401k plan, spending all of your energy into growing out a W-2 income. And, I looked at him, I was like, the irony is I see what you're doing is super risky. Yeah. And that was a big aha for me. It's like that, no, the risk is actually in being conservative. Yeah. The risk is not.
The risk is in taking no risk.
That's right. It really, really, like it hit me hard that the idea that somehow, some way, not taking on what you consider to be risk is the way to go forward. It's like, no, you're almost guaranteeing that one day something will happen to your income stream, and you're not. It's going to be very adverse. It's going to be an imposed burn your boat moment for you, and so I started to really deeply think about this.
So how did he respond? When you said, hey, I think what you do is actually very risky? Because I think a lot of people that are listening may be in his position, right? You said he was married. He had his first kid or something.
Yeah, 2 kids at the time. Yeah,
2 kids. Probably has a good job.
Yeah,
right.
Great job.
And he finds what you do interesting, because everyone finds what we do interesting. Oh, you buy these ugly houses and you make them cool, right? And that's interesting. And I've thought about getting into real estate, but then they don't. because of the fears that we're talking about right now. So what was his reaction when you said, you know what, it's funny, ironically, I think what you do is much riskier than what I do?
Well, I broke it out straight away. It's like, what do you find is risky? Is it the flipping side that you think is risky, or the building up a portfolio
Right.
side that he thinks is risky? And he's like, both, all of it. And so I said, okay, first and foremost, we'll meet again a week from
Yeah.
now, because not much else going on. It's the start of COVID, right? I was like, go read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and we'll have another chat a week
Right.
from now, right? And I think 4 months later, he bought his first house. You just made it happen.
Yeah.
Because he got it.
Cool.
And we kind of leaned into the following conversation. So like meeting two, let's just continue this analogy for the purpose of getting the message across is, we don't know really anything, and planning your life on the basis of, well, I think this, I think that, that's all short term.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible. What do you think about Bitcoin next week? I don't know. What do you think about the S&P next week?
Right.
What do you think about anything next week? You don't control it. Nobody controls it. Warren Buffett would never do a day trade.
Right.
Warren Buffett makes 2 or 3 decisions a year. He sits in his office and he makes 2 or 3 decisions a year. And he's, the second, third, fourth, fifth wealthiest guy in the world. And so if you take the same approach to real estate and you simply understand how it works and then buy 2 or 3 assets a year, you're going to be wealthy.
Yeah.
It's simple. It's as simple as that. You will be wealthy if you have the right strategy. So let's talk about what that strategy is. And there's an algorithm for it. It's a simple algorithm. For anybody out there in the the tech space, you understand how algorithms, you build them, you follow the algorithm, and it works. So wealth is created simply by taking on debt. So debt, I'll say the algorithm first, and then we'll dig into it. Debt multiplied by time, multiplied by scale, equals wealth.
Okay.
Debt by time by scale equals wealth. So what does that mean?
Right.
Everybody I know who is wealthy, almost everybody I know who is wealthy, used debt and leveraged themselves to get there.
Yeah.
In real estate, if you go in and you buy your very first, you put all your eggs into one basket, and you say, okay, I'm going to buy my first house. It's going to be like 300. I work hard at my W-2 job, and I'm going to buy my first house. I hate risk. So I'm going to buy my first house. I'm going to buy it in cash.
Right.
Well, you're going to get 5.5% yield on your money,
Yeah.
right? No harm in that. Your tenant eventually will pay more rent, but your investing career will stop right there, because unless you've got another 300. So the debt part of it is that I put $100,000 down. I use $400,000 of the bank's money. I buy a $500,000 asset, right? And I then hold it for time. So what's happening over time?
Before you get to the time, I want to interject, as it's interesting because I hear a lot of times people say, well, I want to buy something, but I want to put cash down, or I want to put like 60% down, right? I want to get a really, really low payment.
Right.
Because again, it's less risky, right? In their eyes, right? They're taking less risk because that payment's going to be so low in case what happens if the tenant doesn't pay this month? What if you have to evict them? All these different, these made up challenges, right? They probably never had to evict a tenant in their life, and they're already, building that in.
Yeah, your brain is...
Talk a little bit about the psyche of, if you were to buy your first rental property, why not buy in cash? Why not? Because then you've got a $1,500 a month tenant. Yeah, you're paying property manager maybe and some taxes and insurance. Maybe you're walking away with $1,000 versus like breaking even. Talk to us a little bit before we move to the next thing. I think it's important for people. And there's both sides of the coin, right? You have the rich dad, poor dad, which would certainly be do not pay in cash. Get in where you're leveraging debt, and then you have the other side of things where different real estate investors have said, look, you should just own everything free and clear. You may only own 5 houses in your life versus 105, but you own those, and no one can take those away from you unless you don't pay your taxes. So talk a little bit about why someone would put 80% debt on a property versus just paying it off in cash.
All right. If you're trying to get wealthy, that's what this is about. And we're not trying to just get a small bit of income.
Right.
We're trying to create wealth. It's a wealth algorithm. It's not a safety algorithm.
Got it.
All right.
That makes sense.
So in harnessing debt, you you can put 20% down. That's a pretty. Do you think the housing market's going to, over the next 20 years is just going to drop by 20%?
I do not.
Over a 20-year period.
Right.
It's never happened before in history, right? And so it's happened on a temporary basis,
Sure, of
but
course.
it's never happened on a long-term basis. And so if you want to create meaningful wealth and meaningful income, you have to use leverage.
Yeah.
In certainly in my experience, and everyone I've ever met who has created very serious wealth through real estate has used debt.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, you take an example where we put 20% down, right? We borrow 80%. I think that's a reasonable,
Sure.
Equity position that you
Right.
have in. But it's very important to also understand the rest of the algorithm, Clark, to really answer your question. Is the debt side of it is just a manner in which you can multiply your wealth 20 years from now,
Right.
So there's not a great deal of risk in taking on 20% of debt.
Right.
So the debt, right, by time, you have to understand what's happening over time. So I put $200,000 down. I bought. Let's just make it simple. I put $100,000 down and buy a $500,000 house. What's happening over time? Not next year. I'm not worried about what the
Right.
Fed is doing. I'm not worried about what Bitcoin is doing.
Yeah.
I'm not worried about where interest rates are. I'm not worried about the international money markets or the war in Ukraine or anything
Right.
like that. So what's really happening over time is inflation every single year is just increasing the value of my asset, decreasing the payability
Right.
of my, the value essentially of my underlying mortgage, and it's increasing my rent, and it's giving me tax every year. And so you extrapolate that over 20 years, right? So what's happening over time? You take on the debt, and time is going to erode all the debt. And I use a good example that I think is good is if you want to understand how this is working. Imagine a diver, and he's got 2 air bottles on his back, and one of his air bottles, is full of debt,
Yeah.
and the other one's completely empty. Well, over time, that air bottle that's full of debt enters the other bottle that is full of wealth. And so every year, and it's really, it just happens as you're living your life, as you're going to your job, as you're, it just happens
Right.
as you're living your life, as you're having your kids, as you're, as you're just going about your life, because 20 years is going to happen. If you're 32, believe me, I'm 52. You're going to be 52 before you know it.
Right.
Right. So this analogy
the
that
time.
I'm using, this time is
Yeah.
where mortgages get paid off, wealth is created, because remember, when the debt goes down into the other tank,
Right.
it's coming up the other side as wealth.
And I want to quantify and I'll give you an example is that, we sit here in Tampa Bay area, right?
Yeah.
That's where we're shooting this podcast. It's where we buy our real estate. I saw a buddy post something on Facebook the other day, and he's a realtor, and he posted 10 years ago. So you're talking about 20. Let's just talk 10 years of time, right? And the average list price that a realtor was listing their property in Tampa Bay, and these are the top realtors within this organization, was like $105,000. Right, 105,000, and that was like all that. The average list price was like 90,000, some was like 120,000, but it averaged out to about 105,000. The median list price today in the Tampa Bay area is what?
420.
420. Okay, this is 10 years. Now let's take COVID out for just a second, because obviously things went up. Let's just say it was 320.
Okay.
Right? Let's just take COVID and let's just give 100,000 to COVID. Do you think that, to your point about time, that if you would have bought a house in 2013 in Tampa and you delayed your gratification, you didn't sell it, you rented it, do you think that the rents would have gone up over a 10-year period and your house would have went from 100,000 to it's now 420,000? It was mind-blowing to me. It wasn't, because I understand the debt by time by scale, but just looking at that one thing, and it's like, okay, if I would have put a mortgage on that $100,000 house, so I put 20 grand down.
20,000 down, yeah.
20,000 down. Let's say you put another 10 or 15 into renovation. So let's just say you're into it for $40,000, and that 100,000 is now worth 420. Now, what if you did that more than once?
Well, that's what scale is. So
There
let's
you go.
let's
So
get in.
talk to the scale.
So the algorithm, I know a huge amount of people. Again, just to reiterate, I have been on the phone with investors for 20 years, at least, more, and I have seen this journey over and over. So when I talk about debt by time by scale. This is not some concept I read in a book or picked up
Right.
off a YouTube video. It's genuinely, I've just witnessed it and I came up with it myself. So just empirically, just by observing it, you know. And so we've talked about debt. We've talked about what's happening over time, but you need to do enough of it.
Yeah.
So how many people do you know who own one house? Or, you know, there's the accidental landlord, right?
Right.
So, you know, two partners get together, they buy a house, or excuse me, they own individual houses. They get together, they keep their original house, and they move into a house together. But it stops right there. You know, I see that all the time.
Right.
I call them accidental landlords. Way better than not being an accidental landlord.
Right.
I'd rather be an accidental landlord than not a landlord at all. But the concept of scale, and this is the really powerful part of it, because it's the momentum and urgency that creates the rest of the algorithm. You understand that you have to use debt in order to leverage assets so that you can put your name on them,
Right.
so that you can jump on the vehicle. So you can put that 20,000 down, and now it's worth.
So you're not sitting in the dugout anymore.
You need to use debt. Time's doing all the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
In our last podcast, we were talking about, you know, that maybe 2 or 3% of my time over the last 20 years has created 97% of my wealth. And 98% of my time which was, you know, flipping houses. It's essentially a W-2 income.
Right.
All that that's done was allow me buy the seeds.
Right.
That's all it did. It was allow me put the rocks in the river, to use the analogy from our last podcast. But I have met hundreds and hundreds of real estate investors who they've read all the books, they've got their mindset right, and they do their first deal. And so they understand debt, they understand time, but they don't understand scale. And what scale is you need to do enough of it to make a meaningful difference in your life. So if you want to be worth in real estate, I'll use simple numbers. You can tell me your debt, and I'll, within reason, tell you how wealthy you'll be in 20 years' time. Yeah. Basically, in a nutshell. And when we're talking about real estate, of course, you may own a business, you may own other assets outside of that. But in real estate, you could tell me your debt, and I'll, within reason, be able to tell you how wealthy you'll be. And so, not if you tell me how many doors you have.
Right.
That tells me nothing.
Yeah.
But how much debt you have tells me a lot. And so this is not bad debt. This is not boat debt or motorbike debt or Tesla debt.
Yeah.
This is real estate debt that pays for itself, right? And so the concept of scale really boils down to this. You take, you know, a $200,000 house and you put 20% down, right? So you can put $40,000 down on that $200,000 house. And you're going to borrow $160,000 to buy that house. Okay. And so in 20 years' time, that $160,000 will be inflated and been paid away.
Right.
The rent that I'm just going to use easy numbers, right? So the rent that you're taking in, let's say $1,000 today, is going to be 20 years from now, it's going to be at least $2,000.
Yeah, at least.
But it's going to be unlevered. You're going to not have any debt on it anymore. And so you've got this, you know, $40,000 that in 20 years' time is literally going to be throwing off 50% annualized return every year just on rent, let alone it's going to continue growing, right? So the scale part of it is always be buying, always be buying, because the confidence that that's what the topic here is about. This algorithm is solely responsible for my financial confidence in real estate. I understand that if I take on some debt and I have enough time, and I do it in enough scale.
Consistently. Yeah.
Consistently. And so, and dollar cost average into this, you know, don't go in and buy, you know, your very first deal be an 80 unit, because that could take you out.
Yeah.
That could take you down. I'm all like, this podcast is about being conservative.
Right.
If you want the get rich and go parabolic podcasts, this is not the podcast for you. There's loads of podcasts out there that are out there that will, you know, belittle you if you're not doing these things. I'm talking about staying within certain guardrails.
Right.
I'm a conservative investor.
Yeah.
Very conservative. However, when you understand debt by time by scale, it is the single thing that allows me operate in a high inflation period, low inflation period, a scary economic environment. I don't care.
You're not timing the market at all.
At all.
You're just consistently buying. You'll buy some at the higher points of the market, some at the lower, but you have the confidence that at the end, it's kind of simple, right? If you buy a property and the mortgage payment is $1,000 and the rent is $1,500. I don't care where the market is. It could be up, it could be down, it could be sideways, right? You're still always, the thing that I've learned over buying through the down part and the up part is that people always need a place to live. It doesn't matter.
Don't you love
know,
that?
they have a job, they don't have a job, they have a great job, they have a job they don't like, they still need a roof over
Are they
their head.
going to AI themselves out of that?
I don't know if they can AI a roof over their head.
How about
yet.
outsourcing it to
This
China?
is end of 2023. Maybe we might be. This might be aging itself if in a few years AI can put a roof over your head. But
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. So that is that's the foundation that gives you the confidence, right? And it's the same way it gives me the confidence to go out and make quick and decisive decisions on creating my wealth, right? It's almost like the concrete slab of a house, right? And you have to have that foundation. So kind of getting back to the confidence is that if I can kind of describe what you just said and the confidence that you have is to buy these houses, to learn to do all this, you had to take action, right? You didn't create this portfolio because of YouTube. Right? You created it by buying and taking action, right? And I like to, and it's something too that it's the same thing. I like to use the gym because I feel like not everyone is a real estate investor, but I think that we could all agree that we always want to be in better shape.
Yeah.
If you're fat, skinny, great shape, not good shape,
Everybody wants to
you
be
always
fit.
want to be in better shape than you are typically, right? So it's kind of like saying, okay, you can sign up for the gym membership, but if you don't go to the damn gym, I don't care how nice that gym is, nothing's happening. You have to take that first step right now. You walk into the gym, you start working out, you don't know what the hell's going on, you don't know what the machines do, you're scared, there's people around you that are in much better shape, they're doing all these crazy exercises, right? Day one is hard, it's scary, it's fearful, right? But you took the action. When you walk out of that gym the first day, you're going to feel so much better than if you just sat around and watched Netflix that Tuesday night. But you went to the gym, you made the decision to take that action. Guess what happens on that Wednesday when you go back? You already kind of have a little bit better feel for the gym. Maybe you've seen someone do an exercise. You're going to go try that one today. And guess what happens is you start learning new things, right? And it's not like you intend to learn those new things, but I see that guy over there doing that exercise. I think I'm going to try that exercise today and then continue to learn new things, right? And what happens through that actions? What results from that? Do you have a six-pack on Wednesday? Do are you ready to go jump into a bikini and go down on the beach because you went 2 days in a row? Of course not, right? You buy a rental property, right? Are you an expert, a guru? Are you teaching classes on day two? Maybe in this time and age, there are people that are teaching classes when they own one rental property. So maybe that's a bad example. But at the end of the day, you don't have a six-pack on day two, right? But do you feel better? Do you feel more confident to go back on Thursday? Is Thursday easier than Wednesday and is Wednesday easier than Tuesday? You're damn right it is, right? So you're gaining the experiences, right? And guess what happens is that 6 months down the road, if you've started to stay consistent, right, and you've continued to do it, you're going to, guess what? You're going to probably know some people at the gym. You might have asked them some questions on what they do to look the way they do. You're going to try new things. All these positive things, and all you've done is just taken action, right? Did you go to the right gym or the wrong gym? Who cares what gym you went to? You went to a place that has weights to be able to improve yourself. Are there people in there that are more knowing whether it's a nice gym or a bad gym? Of course there are. So you being able to see what they're doing, whether you talk to them or not, but maybe you get the confidence after 6 months to be like, I see you in here every day. What the hell is that thing you're doing over there? And they tell you.
It's brilliant.
And you learn something, right? So it's the same thing in building a business. It's the same thing in buying real estate. Is that first property, it's probably, you're going to make a ton of mistakes. But guess what happens when you go to buy the second property? Guess what happens when you buy and you live in the first house and you're like, okay, I feel confident enough to buy the second house and not sell the first one because I know that house. I know how to go out and reach out to a lender. I kind of know what they need for me, all the documents. They want your firstborn with these lenders. So it's like, it hurts less, right? So the second step about getting to the debt by time by scale is being able to take that action, and just through the action taken, you are getting experiences. You're getting good experiences. You're seeing maybe what not to do. And guess what? If you're learning what not to do, then are you more confident when you go to buy the second house? Are you more confident to know, maybe with the gym analogy is that maybe I know what not to eat now. Maybe I shouldn't eat this, I should eat that, right? Whatever that looks like. So if you take the action and you start to learn experiences, do you think you're more confident on Thursday than you were on Tuesday when you first walked in the gym?
Yeah, it's brilliant. I'm as you're talking, there's a thousand conversations flashing in my mind. I recall being in a car with a young, very informed engineer, and he was using language and lingo that even I was impressed with.
Yeah.
He knew every creative financing method.
Yep.
He knew everything. And he asked me for his advice. And I said, put down the books.
Yeah.
I said, do yourself a favor. Stop reading. Just simply stop reading.
Right.
You need to start taking action right now. And I think that's a great topic for our next podcast is how do you get resilient, to deal with the setbacks and what I call the psychological bullets
Right.
of getting tough, building up a tough skin and understanding that there's some learning involved, but the debt by time by scale is the fundamental framework.
Right.
It is the foundation of your putting aside your fears. So, we're talking about confidence today and building up your confidence. If you are listening to this, know that algorithm, that debt by time by scale algorithm has freed. I've spoken to hundreds of investors who've come to me personally and said that single algorithm has allowed me operate in a way that I never did before. Because remember, the human brain is designed to find problems and scan the universe and the terrain for and create a scenario in your what if this, what if that, what if this happens, what if that happens, what if the brain is there's nothing like it in the universe at scanning the world and looking for problems. But if anybody has any experience with CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, they'll understand that, well, where's the evidence for this?
Right.
Where's the evidence that all these things are going to happen? Because, I own a large portfolio of real estate. Those things haven't happened to me. I've flipped hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of homes. All the things that you're saying, I've never experienced, believe it or not. And so it's amazing how the human brain kind of works against you.
Yeah.
But I think the debt by time by scale algorithm is, if you're in Income Island and you're trying to get to Wealth Island, I think it's for me personally, it's the single most important wealth advice that I've ever, I didn't receive it.
Right.
I learned it over
You
years. I
learned
just
it.
wished I knew it earlier.
So you took action, right?
Yeah.
You through experiences, you learned it, right? And then that gives you more confidence to go out and make quicker decisions, right? And then you
That's
become,
right.
and then you become more strategic, right? Because you can look at something and be like, oh, this reminds me of the house I bought 8 years ago, same neighborhood. I'm staying away from that, right? And you can make that, but you can't. That bad experience you had on that fourth rental where tenants kept leaving because they didn't like the neighborhood. It's like people would look at that as a failure and say, oh, I bought this rental and I couldn't keep it rented, and then I had to evict this tenant, and then the pipes burst and everything. And it's like, yeah, but you're learning so much from that now going into the next one that, oh, wait, I know those pipes. I've seen those pipes before.
That's
those
right.
need to be replaced. I'm going to need a $10,000 discount or I'm not buying this house. I know this neighborhood. You're saying it's going to be a $1,500 rental. And I know that I'm going to have to put in a higher vacancy cost because I'm going to turn it every year.
Yeah.
So it's a $1,200 rental.
Yeah.
And then the numbers work or they don't work, right?
That's right.
But you'll never know that without going through that experience,
Yeah.
which means taking the action in the first place.
It's fantastic. Again, another podcast that we need to do an episode on is underwriting.
Yeah.
Just right there. Just how do you understand? People come to me all the time. It's like, hey, David, I saw this, this house on Zillow. I see it's got
Should I buy it?
Yeah, it's got a $30,000 discount. Do you think that's a good deal? I'm like,
Discount from what?
I have no idea if it's a
Yeah.
good deal. I need to underwrite. I need to put the numbers in and give you an answer once I've done that. And it is incredible how many people don't know how to underwrite a real estate deal. But it's time to wrap up today. So look, the backbone to confidence is really understanding that algorithm. Real estate confidence for me, anyhow, is understanding debt by time by scale, and then how do you use scale? So scale is all about having clear income and net worth goals 10 or 15 years from now. Imagine that. I can tell you with laser precision how much income and how much wealth you will have if you take on $4 million worth of debt, because you'll probably have a $6 million portfolio. That debt will get paid off at a pretty obvious rate, at a set rate, on an amortization schedule. And inflation, I can input a number for inflation. I could tell you that on year 22, your $4 million of debt on your $6 million portfolio will be paid off. Your $6 million portfolio will be worth $12 million, and your income is going to be $48,300 a month, unlevered.
Right.
Would you like $48,000 a month every month and have $12 million of wealth? Because that's how it works.
Right.
And it's that predictable.
Yeah.
It really is. So understand your clear income and net worth goals. Have a defined strategy. So I'm going to buy 2 houses a year, every year, in this neighborhood, no matter, like, prices will go up, prices will go down,
Right.
but I'm going to buy 2 houses a year every year, and I'm going to do that. That's my strategy. That's my buy box.
Right.
Right. And then I'm going to have the discipline to do it.
Yeah.
The discipline is, people do it. They do it for 1 year, they do it for
Yeah,
2
the
years, and then they get
consistency.
sidetracked, and they do this, and they do that. The people who are successful are the people who have literally the income and net worth goals, the defined strategy, the discipline, and finally, the most important thing, they have the time.
Yeah.
They're in their 30s,
Yep.
they're in their 40s. You still got time in your 50s. But once you get into your late 60s and 70s, you're probably investing for your kids or your
Right.
grandkids or something along those times. But understand those things: clear income, net worth goals, a defined strategy, discipline, and the time to do it. And that is where my confidence comes from.
Yeah. And I love it. And ultimately, the more confident you are, the easier it is to make decisions. And when it's easier, usually it's less stressful. As I turn 40, I'm like, I want to do things that are less stressful, not more stressful, right? And it's like an epiphany I had. But so I think the takeaway that I hope that for me, the way that I look at it, and I'll go back to a resolution, right? We're right around here, the first of the year. So what do a lot of people make resolutions? Oh, I'm going to lose 20 pounds. I'm going to eat better, right? I would challenge you to say that the takeaway, if you could leave this podcast today, is the gym analogy of, instead of saying, David, I'm going to lose 20 pounds next year. How the hell do I lose 20 pounds? Like, do I do more exercise? Do I go to the gym 5 times a day, 2 times a day? I would just say, I'm going to go to the gym 3 or 4 days a week, and that's it. It's very quantifiable. It's say, I'm going to go to the gym 4 days, right? Now, in 6 months, you may have lost 15 pounds or 20 pounds or 10 pounds, but all the experience you gained, all the confidence that you gained, right? Would you be pissed off at yourself if you only lost 10 pounds instead of 20? I feel pretty damn good that I still lost 10 pounds, right?
Yeah.
But all those extra things that you gained along the way. And it's the same thing with real estate. If you want to buy 10 houses, it starts with 1.
That's right.
And guess what happens when you buy that first property, right? You learned how to get a loan.
Yeah.
You learned how to talk to a realtor. You learned how to read a closing statement when you go to sign the papers to buy the house. You learned all these different things. You learned how to read an inspection report, right? So you get all of these things that you learn with that 1, right? Now, does that mean that you're going to buy 10 houses in 10 years or 5 years or 15 years? Again, we all have our own journey and our own speed, but it starts with 1,
Yeah,
right?
they say the first one is the bitch of the bunch.
The
right?
first one is the bitch of the bunch. So I would challenge everyone here is to, instead of worrying per se, and this is the way I've looked at it my whole life, instead of worrying about losing 25 pounds, not kind of knowing how to get there, is that I do know that I can say I can sign up for a gym membership, and I tell myself I will go 4 times a week for it is my new strategy.
What about when it's raining? Do you still go when it's raining?
Well,
Do you still go when it's snowing?
that's the delayed gratification, right? Is that sometimes it sucks outside, sometimes it's cold, sometimes it's rainy, sometimes the traffic is a little bit worse. And at the end of the day, what separates the people that are going to truly put the stepping stones, you don't think that the stepping stones that the wealthy people put in the river to get to Wealth Island, it came with some rainy days.
Oh, that's right.
It came with some snowy days, right? So there's going to be times where you're going to tell yourself, I don't want to go today. But ultimately, you're delaying the gratification of just, pulling the covers over your head because it's a cold day, and you're delaying that till a later thing for a bigger thing. So if you could take one piece, is to take action, which will give you the experience, which will then provide you confidence to keep rinsing and repeating. But being able to just say, I'm going to go and I'm going to buy 1 house, and I'm going to take all this amazing experience. And then if I don't buy the next house for 2 years or 3 years or 1 year, that's okay. Because I got up to the plate and I swung the bat.
That's great stuff, Clark.
Yeah.
So enjoy today's podcast.
I did too.
hope you guys did too. Join us next week. We'll have some more bombs to drop.
Yeah.
But get investing and get serious and use your time wisely.
Thanks, guys.
You've been listening to the Burn Your Boats podcast with Clark Lunt and David Shaw. We would love to hear from you. Please reach out at burnyourboatswealth.com with comments, questions, and if you have a topic you would like Clark and David to discuss on an upcoming episode. We would very much appreciate it if you took the time to rate and review Burn Your Boats podcast on your favorite podcast listening app, and make sure to follow and share on social media. Content in Burn Your Boats podcast is for entertainment purposes only and is not legal or financial advice. Please review our legal disclaimer at burnyourboatswealth.com. Thank you for listening.